Hello, here we're going to cover a demo of the example for creating a payment element inside of the Salesforce Lightning Web Components using the Visualforce Apex pages. So here I have an example of this running in my environment, and we can see that in my example, I have the page loaded. This is actually iframed inside of a Lightning Web Component. But here you can see that the element's loaded and it's accepting credit card numbers, month, CSV, and postal code if required by the card type. So here I'll put in a Visa, and we can see that it's loading the CSV, and it's also loading the zip code as a requirement. For deployment of this, we simply download the package from GitHub. And then once we've downloaded the package, all we need to do is go ahead and open up the Force application main default directory. Once we have that open, we can simply navigate down to the Lightning Web Components to see that there's the Stripe element here. But the piece that we have to modify is actually under static resources, and it's this JavaScript file. In the example, I have the public key or the publishable key from Stripe being set here. This is the only piece we really have to modify to have this working. And you can see that this page actually loads the client secret via URL parameter, and that's being passed in from the Lightning Web Component. So that's how we're passing the client secret in this example. Just to have it kind of working, you could obviously pass this a number of different ways. And from my Stripe dashboard, I'm just going to grab the publishable key, simply make sure I'm in test mode, go to developers, click on API keys, and here I'm just going to grab my publishable key. Then I'm going to go back into my JavaScript file, and I'm just going to simply paste that in here. Once that's pasted in, I can simply say File, Save, and then go ahead and deploy this example here. Now that that's been deployed, I can go back into my Salesforce component. I'll go ahead and refresh this to make sure the changes have kicked in. And I can see the elements loaded, and I'll simply put in one of our test card numbers, as well as a relevant zip, and just go ahead and click Pay with Card. You can see I'm just echoing back the with an alert page, the payment intent that was created. If I go into my dashboard, I can actually see this payment intent, and I can see that it was successful. So that's that piece of the integration. I'll go through how it works a little bit. So the first thing that we're doing is we're actually loading the Lightning Web Component. The Lightning Web Component's doing nothing more than just iframing the page. We do that because Salesforce blocks loading external Java libraries inside of the Lightning Web Components themselves. So we actually use a Visualforce page and we iframe it in here, and you can see the iframe that I've set up. Then from the JavaScript component, we're loading the Stripe API handler here. And you can actually see I'm calling hey import, and I say make get callout, and then I'm just loading the make it callout method from the Stripe API handler. So that's one of the few pieces we need to make this work. The rest of this is the majority of just Salesforce code. But here you can see I'm rendering the callback. I'm doing that to basically populate the iframe with the correct URL that I wanted to load. And by the URL, what I'm doing is I'm appending the client secret as a URL parameter here. So going through the call, the first thing is we have to define the URL parameters that are set. These are available in the Stripe API documentation on what's available to pass here, but here you can see the different variables that I'm passing in: amount, currency, payment methods. Obviously this would be modified for a production use or anything else, but then we define the post, and then we define the URL. So between the URL encoded URL parameters, the method, and the URL, that's all we have to pass into the Stripe API handler here. Again, this is a promise, so we have to do an await, And then once we do the await, this is actually being passed back is a JSON body, is text. So we do have to parse that once it's passed back here. But then we can do the very simple thing of looking at that return. And here you can see I'm setting the this site client secret equals, and I'm setting a URL for it to redirect the iframe to. And then I'm logging this out just for an example in this code. But essentially setting this, and that's exactly what the Stripe element page is looking for here. This is the page that's being called in the iframe. And you can see this is very standard stuff where we're loading a card element to mount the card element to. So that's pretty much it on how this was built. Again, the only piece it's calling is the Stripe API handler, and that's handling all the backend calls for us. And again, that's being done here with this method here. Thank you.